Rick and I are going to have a little conversation with Dave.
Oh, okay.
Rick left me a voicemail. Listen to it yet. So I talked to him yesterday. He and I spoke about it yesterday.
Was he the same?
Yes, but he said we also didn't rattle the change. And I said, let's try to just. We didn't. You didn't. The group didn't. He didn't say rattle the chain, but didn't oppose that. Except the fact that.
Yeah, well, I think that I don't think that should be a sign of acquiescence. I mean, it technically isn't our ballgame.
Well, that's what I'm trying to. That's what. Yeah. So I've got to reread the.
I mean, there was a lot that was the consultant was saying that's not correct. I mean, he thinks that 55% of our tax revenue is of our general fund revenue comes from taxes. Well, 85% comes from you could see as he was starting to formulate his ideas how he was going to. And I was being a little bit facetious when I said, I was being a little facetious when I said, I know what the outcome of this is going to be.
Peter?
Oh, jeez.
You can start.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Finance Committee for Thursday, January 14th. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Is there any public comment to come before the committee today that is not on the agenda? Linnell, we don't have any minutes? No? Okay, that's fine. Okay. The first on our agenda today is to review the fire department budget, review the police department and harbor master budgets. If time allows, to speak about a couple of the one or two, at least, citizen warrant articles that we asked for some additional information. I'd like to welcome the new chief. I guess you're seated in the perfect location. I think what we usually try to do is begin with just kind of going over, giving you an opportunity, and I'm sorry I didn't chat with you before the meeting, but giving you an opportunity to just give an overview, kind of like maybe along the lines of the mission and goals, reflect on last year, but really since this is really your first year, think about your focus for the coming year strategically and operationally. And then the committee you really don't need to go over the budget detail. The committee will just kind of ask questions as we go along. If that's okay, we'll do that as a process. Great. So why don't you just kick it off with a little summary and whatever you want to do. I mean, last year, the biggest initiative was hire a new fire chief, so we've accomplished that. And I guess I think the committee's been very, very much interested in your priorities for the upcoming year.
Last year the biggest level they hired me, but the biggest thing I was the new station, so that was a big focus, and we'll continue to be focused for a couple of years. So going forward for next fiscal year, be a big focus on the new project in the fire station, working to open bids up in April, hopefully break ground by June. We'll take a lot of money for the coming year. Another new project for next year, we've done a presentation for the selectmen on the 20th, next Wednesday. We want to increase our ability to meet national standards on response time and medical standards. So we're looking to increase our service to ALS, Advanced Life Support Paramedic Service on the island, and focus on trying to find ways to reduce our response time. Also meet state standards.
think maybe before you go into the next phase, and I know those are all important topics for the community and obviously for your department, and maybe we can chat about some of them. And it might be give people an opportunity to ask questions about it. So with the new fire station project, anybody want to ask about that, or? No, okay, all right.
Chief, breaking ground in June,
That's what we're hoping, yeah.
seems pretty ambitious. Is that, with opening bids in April, do you think that you'd be able to select
Looking
and
to
have
go
people
to
digging
the-
holes in 3 months?
I don't know, I think they're looking at the June 21st selectmen's meeting as a notice to proceed type timeframe, and then I guess it would depend on transportation, getting contractors over here. It's going to depend whether the same contractor is working on the school, gets a bid for the fire station, or there's a different company that's got to gear up and get equipment and go over here, so.
Are they the same contractors that the school is talking to, or?
I don't know who's going to bid on our project. I think we all anticipate that the contractor working on the school will bid on the fire station. And I suppose that would be a good option for us, where they could probably get quicker than somebody else. As far as money-wise in station, the first set of bids came back, it's looking like everything's, so far, the estimates are within our budget, below budget.
Oh, good.
And we don't know if we can put them back yet, but we're hoping that the estimates are on target.
So this is like at a, what level of, have you gone to, you have the floor plans laid out and the square footage and what's in the
Yeah, they have
space?
floor plans laid out, they haven't finalized the HVAC system yet.
Okay.
So there's still some detail to be
Okay.
running the plans.
Okay.
But the first set of estimates based on floor plans, square
Okay.
footage.
Okay.
The rough estimates come in
Okay.
about $1 million under our budget.
Okay.
So that's
And that includes, you continue to have significant, or the appropriate level of contingencies, and I'm sure that are in that, so,
we're $1 million under right now, so.
okay. All right. Any other?
Chief, just actually, maybe a dumb question, but could you relate the fact that you're getting initial budget, the initial estimates under $1 million less than you were hoping, and if we had special town meeting back, whatever it was, a couple weeks ago in the fall, because the project was coming in, what was it, $1.7 million more than it approved at town meeting, so
Very initial. So
it just, on the surface, it sounds like a little bit of a flip-flop to me.
It's still early, though, there's still like a
I
conceptual.
just understand, on one hand, you felt you didn't have enough money, so you went for additional appropriation from the town.
Right.
And then you just said that the initial census things are coming in a little lower.
Right, right, so our initial budget was 15 million, our initial bids, estimates have come back at 16 million now. So we went for 2 more million, so now we have $17 million appropriated for the fire station. Our initial estimates are coming in about 16 million right now, so it's still more than we initially had hoped. And we don't know, I think the school actual bids came in above estimates, right?
Yeah.
So that's still,
Yeah, so that's.
still up in the air, but I think we're in a good spot.
Just to follow up on that, Chief, is that your design development drawing, is that about 75%, or the cost estimated numbers? You said you got bids, so obviously if they're going to provide you a bid, I'm sure the design is what percentage of the way to completion?
They were estimates, they weren't actual bids.
So it's probably just a cost estimator.
Process,
Yeah.
mostly
Yeah, I
based
think
on-
they're.
So you're not going to get the real,
I think it's.
They haven't
Yeah.
yet finished designing the full HVAC system, that's, they're not real true.
so it's a long way to go.
So it's good that you're under, because it'll be
Yeah.
higher.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else on the fire station project? Okay. Just chat a little bit about the ambulance service, the movement to ALS. That's something I know that the community's been thinking about for many years. We've all heard kind of the pros and cons, but I'd like to personally hear kind of as a new leader, what your kind of strategic view on that is, and what your experience has been, and why you think that's important for the community.
So we're gonna give a full presentation to the board, to the Board of Selectmen on the 20th, but. So,
You can just summarize, just a couple minutes, not.
Yeah, we're basically we're the only community left in Massachusetts that doesn't have ALS service.
Very good.
Everybody else in the state has the ability to get a paramedic to their house for service. We don't have that here. 70% of our patients require ALS service. Or would use
So Chief, does that assume that those services that the fire department would charge would be taken away from the hospital, I'm assuming, since now those services don't have to be given at the hospital?
No.
I don't think they'd be taken away, a lot of them would be given earlier, so if you broke your leg, you had pain management in the field at your house before we moved you, rather than waiting for your pain management to take that to the hospital. You get an IV in the field instead of getting it at the hospital, so I imagine to some degree, the hospital's not gonna be able to charge for an IV if we already provided it in the field. So some of the services are shipped to the field, which is more appropriate for the patient.
You know, usually hospital ER charges are like blocks or, you know, so it's levels of care basically, and that level of care wouldn't change based on the service that was delivered in the field. David?
I have two questions. The first is there any consideration for outcomes and whether outcomes go up or go down with ALS services?
There's been lots and lots of studies throughout the nation, and I think most of them show that the long-term patient outcome is much better when the ALS service is provided earlier, when they have earlier defibrillation, when they have earlier pharmaceutical treatments. I think there, if you research online, there might be one that says it's worse, and that was only one study that was provided for nursing home patients. So patients that were at skilled nursing facilities that were provided ALS service, if for some reason they showed in that particular study that their outcomes weren't as good. It's likely, but it's not what's generally provided by ALS service in communities.
So is the driver cardiac needs, or is, I mean, and this sort of goes along with the second part of my question, which is, if costs are going to go up, do they, I mean, obviously they're borne by the individual who's being treated, and does that fall under reimbursements with typical insurances or Medicare or Medicaid, or is this a absolute increased cost to the people that are being served?
So cardiac is a big reason to have ALS in the field. The sooner you get medication down your pulmonary vessels, the less heart damage you have. Same with strokes. It's a much better outcome, long-term outcome for the patient. Cost-wise, so we would increase billing costs. Medicare and Medicaid patients, there's a fixed fee. They reimburse slightly more for ALS than for BLS, not a dramatic amount more. 25% of our patients are private health care insurance. Those are the ones that their insurance companies would pitch in a larger amount to help pay for the service. The increased cost for going to ALS, part of it is for increased staffing. So we want to put more people on the floor of the fire department. And there's a second reason for that too, and that's response time. Right now, we've got enough people to respond to one call. So the first call we have, most of the time, empty our station, and our station's not able to respond to a second call. 27% of our calls are overlapping, so that's one of the reasons our response times are not what they should be. So part of the cost of putting more people on the floor, and those people that we do hire then paramedics, so that will increase our service to paramedic level.
Yeah, but you could increase the number of staff without going to ALS.
We could.
Instead, stay at BLS.
Correct, and that would help reduce our response times, but it would increase the service level we're providing in the field, which is now the standard in most places in the United States is ALS service, paramedic service.
I mean, there is an overall cost to
Oh, yeah, I
the
think it's-
the medical healthcare delivery system has increased costs. And there's a lot of reimbursement for that, but there's additional cost of the system. But it is the standard of care throughout the country to deliver that service.
Can I answer the question real quick on the cost? Now, the selectmen, we have a meeting, a public meeting on deciding ambulance rates, billing rates. They need to decide how we bill. How they can collect deductibles, not collect deductibles. They're going to decide how much of the cost shift goes to the insurance companies and how much, if any, increase goes to the residents. That's a decision they need to decide. With or without increasing rates to the residents, we can pay for this program for the most part.
John?
What is the schedule? In other words, what's your schedule for, at this point, I'm assuming that we do not have this service level at the present time. What's your schedule for getting it?
Correct, we don't. We laid out a 2-year time frame. So we're not 2 years till we go ALS, 2 years till we can get our level of service up to 4 next year, split over the year, and then the following year hiring 4 more, so a total of 8 paramedics over a 2-year period. We would anticipate getting our ALS license sometime about this time next year, so about a year from now, we would hopefully be licensed to the ALS level.
Just to follow up, have you looked at the, we're adding quite a few people here for a good reason, but you're still adding them. But in some of those people that we're adding, we're going to get reimbursed for. Some of that.
Correct.
Have you done any kind of a study on that?
Depending on where we increase our ambulance rates to, it could well pay for 100% all of the added staff, and there would be no increased cost to the town, depending on where the selectmen set those rates at.
Yeah, some of this may be a little premature, because you're saying to go to this Board of Selectmen on the 20th.
Right.
So-
We need to.
I'm just asking about the plan, I'm not
No, I
asking about what we're going to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure we
I
can.
mean, I could care less.
Right. We're also going to, there's a public, federal grant we can apply for, and I'll apply for the federal grant, which would pay for salaries and benefits for the first 2 years.
But your intent is that, the intent of the plan and the way you're structuring it is to try to come up it being cost neutral.
That's what we're attempting to do, that's the network, yes.
It simply be within the purview of this committee to make a comment about that too, because we can think about that as we go through the budget.
Chief, welcome, by the way, and best of luck on your job. Could you talk about how the additional staff will affect the overtime? Because usually, for the past 10 years that I've been on this committee, it's always been, overtime has been a huge topic with the fire department. Do you anticipate that increased staff will lower the percentage of overtime that's necessary along with going to ALS?
I don't think it'll shift the overtime dramatically. We want to increase the minimum number of people available to respond to calls.
Okay.
So ultimately, what we want to get to in 2 years is to having shifts of 7 with a 5-person minimum over the winter, more in the summer. So we want to do seasonal help in the summertime as well. So the overtime should remain close to where it is right now, I believe. I did a study I emailed every fire department in Massachusetts. I found all the numbers for every fire department on Cape Cod. And if you look at the personnel staffing levels for other fire departments, you can divide calls per people, so how many calls per minimum staff on the floor. We do more than double the average of any other department around. We're by far the highest I can find anywhere. We do triple what anybody else does in the summertime and double in the winter, which is one of the reasons our response times are not what they should be.
Thank you.
Peter?
Do you have any continued ed cost going forward with this program to keep accreditation for these new employees? Costs in training or retraining?
The paramedic training level, they're required to take a few more credits per year. So I think the EMTs are about 28 hours every year, where the paramedics are about 56, about double. So it's about an extra 28 hours per paramedic for the year.
So would factor those into an expense item as,
It's an expense item. It's not
Okay.
a huge amount, but it's a little bit more.
yeah, okay, thank you.
We've still been negotiating. We did negotiate with the union what the paramedic rate will be. So some of these numbers are kind of ballpark. We want to give that a number here before we negotiate the final number.
Is there anyone on staff now that has maybe half of the credits needed to step into this role and maybe jump into the role?
We have one. We have one
Okay.
paramedic right now.
Okay,
Part of the plan is to train, so we want to hire, for the first year, we want to hire 4 new paramedics from outside, and we want to train, we're shooting for 5 the first year, 5 the second year, our existing EMTs, train them to the paramedic level. And by bringing paramedics in from outside, part of their training can be done on duty with the paramedics we hire, so it'll reduce our training costs dramatically for our trainees.
good. Thank you.
David?
I'd be remiss in not asking this question, which is, are we approaching the point where looking for private service is a more cost-effective way for the community to go and having the town exit this business?
I did talk to one private ambulance company that came over. There are private ambulance companies that would like to come over and take the off-island transport business, and that's one business we want to get into because it's money to be made for us, for the town. I don't believe so. We're an island, we have no backup, no mutual aid. And when we do have a fire, give up the ambulance service, we lose 50% of our staff, 75% of our staff, and we just don't have the people to fight the fire or the major incident when it occurs. So having the ambulance people here to do both is kind of an insurance policy for us. It's staff available for the big fires or emergencies when they happen. We couldn't justify 70, 50.
So would you hire, let's say we didn't provide ambulance service, so you're basically saying you would increase the staffing to fight the potentially large fire, is
I
that?
think we would have to. If we gave away the ambulance service, I wouldn't feel comfortable reducing our staff, so I don't think we'd reduce costs, it would increase costs. If we gave it away, we could justify having 60% of our staff on. We'd have to lay off 60% of our department, and then we wouldn't have the people to fight the major emergencies when they occur.
So, I guess from my perspective, when you go to the selectmen, I mean, to me, if we are now starting to have to pay for upgraded service and the revenue isn't covering it, then I personally would be supportive of at least looking hard at whether it would be more cost effective to get a private company in here and just go back to delivering, the basic firefighting services. So whether that's in the form of a comment or I just bring it back to you, is that I would like to see this service break even, education costs, staffing costs, capital costs for the equipment, so that we're not, we're basically, and I know a lot of communities, probably the preponderance of communities provide this as a service, but, given that there's private enterprise out there that potentially could deliver it, I think that it's important for you to look at that in a serious fashion so that you can say to the community, we have looked at this as an alternative and we think that we get better service at no cost to the community because it's self-supporting.
Right. We'll look at it right now. The numbers we're looking at would support hiring 8 additional people in the ALS service. If we went, I talked to one private ambulance company, they want all the billing, so they want the $1 million a year without the new collecting point. They want that themselves.
Well, sure, they take over the business.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So if you look at the numbers, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. If it was an off-island community, it might be more of an option. As if you have a fire, you can call mutual aid from the town who don't have any help. I don't think we could manage a lot of emergencies with 40% of our staff.
Have you done like a mini pro forma that says projected revenue, estimated expenses?
Yes.
And is that something you could share with us? That would be good for us to see.
I think it's sort of embedded in this budget. Is that right, Brian?
Well, I think over a couple-year period, it'd be nice to see.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
What the revenue.
The changes because as I talked about in the ambulance reserve fund, the money, portion of the money that would go to this is still at the 2 ambulance level, which was the original plan until some of these other changes have been presented to the selectmen.
Now, I'm really kind of thinking of a standalone, that says regardless of where the money comes from, because you're talking about rates, taxes, ambulance reserve fund, there's sources, but a little separate mini performance, as you would as you're deciding, basically,
Get
as
into a
David
business.
said, you're thinking about getting into a business. There's a strategic reason for doing it. There's a quality of care reason. Let's talk about, we need to have a financial review too. So I think that's something the committee would like to see. Peter?
Chief, not to put words in your mouth, but a question. Typically, when you add employees, you tend to see the overtime that you were incurring prior to adding employees would go down. So I would think some of the OT may go down when you look at your expenses by adding employees too. So I think if that's the case, that'd be part of that equation. Unless the overtime is deemed a quasi bonus for existing staff and part of their pay, and they become relying on that.
It's not a guarantee.
Okay.
It's not part of the pay.
So I think your OT would probably, you'd see it.
One of the reasons we increase staff is to increase minimum people on the floor, ready to respond to calls. Right now, we have a full shift of 5 people per shift, minimum 3. So we drop down 3 people on the floor. What we want to go to, after a 2-year period, with a shift of 7, with a minimum of 5.
Yeah.
So we still have 2 people that can be off on vacation, sick, training, whatever, without it's still, right now we've got 2 off, down the road, we'll still have 2 off, and a third cost us overtime, so I don't think our overtime is gonna be reduced, because if we weren't increasing minimums, if we were putting down 7 on 4 and still maintaining 3, then yes, it would go down dramatically. But I don't think it will.
Okay.
What's the sense of the committee in terms of requesting, I just said we'd like to see it, but you all agree that it'd be nice to see a pro forma, and, you know, I hate to use the term make versus buy, but this is a new business the town's considering getting into, and what are your thoughts?
Any data is always productive.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think personally, I think it informs the decision, and if it's as you lay it out, then, you know, the selectmen and the town can hold you responsible for, you know, if you think it's revenue neutral, to achieve that, if that's the way the decision is gonna be made. If it's not revenue neutral, that's okay too, if we agree collectively as a community that it's worth putting money into. And again, I feel this only this way because I think there is a private sector alternative. So I think you, in my opinion, you have an affirmative responsibility to prove that this is something that the town is worthy for the town to get into. And it's unlike the other services under like Chief Pittman's service. You're not, you know, we're not, you know, looking for a private police force or anything like that. So but this is just enough, you know, there's enough of a private sector out there that, you know, I think that I think you should go through this exercise and make sure that everybody understands what it's gonna cost and what the business case is for.
I agree with you, David. I just think that to me, a compelling part of this would be, if you do carve out the ambulance service, what would just pure emergency fire services be, and what would it cost the town? Because I'm not sure, from what you're saying, you know, that's going to be a very cost-effective alternative. You're going to end up with a very expensive fire department that doesn't have a lot to do, so to speak.
Correct. If I could add this, I think of it as a synergy. I think that doing both these duties is more cost-effective for the department, being that, in our circumstances, being an island. If we just did one or the other, you'd have issues with staffing, correct? Correct. But doing both is you're trying to solve 2 things at once. But one question I have is ALS is great, and if you increase staffing without going to ALS, would that meet and stay on the BLS? Would that still meet your basic minimum? You'd be increasing response or decreasing response time? And is that that's something that you consider, just increasing staff without going to ALS? I think it's a better way of asking.
We thought about that. We could certainly do that. Increasing staff will lower our response times, and that was one of the things we could do to meet the national standard of 5-minute response times. But it doesn't meet the national standard of medical services provided throughout the country. The standard is ALS, advanced life support for people, and we don't have it. And it's not a huge increased cost. I mean, half of the firefighters in the state are trained at ALS paramedic level. We don't pay them a tremendous amount more money to get that huge increase in service out of them. I mean, the increase in salary for a paramedic versus a firefighter is probably in the range of $5,000 a year per person. So it's not a huge amount more money to get a lot more service out of it.
But it shouldn't be hard to do. You have incremental revenue, you've got incremental staffing, and incremental cost per staffing, 5,000 plus some other stuff. And it should be
Sure, I mean,
John.
Cliff, we got you over here.
So what, our budget's not now showing the cost over a 4-year period. You asking for a cost of not providing ALS versus providing ALS?
I just think, my question would be, what's the incremental revenue and expense, you know, kind of a pro forma for providing ALS?
Okay, we've got that.
Is that,
down. We just need to-
is that,
first, and then we'll-
anybody want to add something to that, or? Okay, and it would be good to have that, I think it'd be, for us, I mean, you're presenting to the board on the 20th.
Correct.
So since this doesn't sound like this is going to be a big burden, it would be good for us to see that early next week before the board meeting, because we may want to make this committee may want to make a comment on that before his input to the Board of Selectmen. So, is that reasonable? Okay.
Do you anticipate the board taking any action on the 20th?
They
I'm
could.
not really sure if they're gonna take action on that. I think it's meant to be more of a, they've already endorsed the budget, which has been submitted. So I think the idea was to, educate them more about how it would work, and what exactly the thoughts are going forward, because we didn't get into that.
Okay. So they endorsed the budget before seeing the kind of a standalone little analysis of the,
Yeah.
so they made their decision perhaps on the strategic and the quality, but not on the make versus buy or whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so,
And I assume the $500,000 in the budget, which is for ambulance expense, is actually a capital number.
Well, it's
To
going to have to be
purchase.
allocated if we proceed with this, because
Understood, it's really less where it gets reallocated, but it is for ambulances that would meet the ALS level requirement.
And there was, in the reserve fund, there's also another 50,000 to equip one of the current ambulances to ALS standards as well.
The ambulances we're looking for either way, whether it's ALS or BLS, we still need ambulances, but they're less than 10 years old and reliable for us.
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
Independent of the ALS question.
Oh, okay, well, that's helpful to.
Yeah, so the ambulances, the 590,000 for two ambulances, which will probably be cut in half and just run this year, are just a standard ambulance. It's going to require about $50,000 per ambulance to make them ALS equipment.
John?
Yeah, it sounds to me like you've got two big priorities here that you mentioned. One of them is upgrading it to advanced life services, and the other is increased staffing to reduce response time.
Correct.
But I'm getting the impression that the first order of business in your mind is ALS.
In my opinion, I think they're both equal, and the solution to both of them is kind of the same, is to hire more people, and we might as well hire people that are paramedics and train our existing paramedical. It's hard to separate them, I guess, for me.
It is. Okay, I was just trying to get a flavor of that. Because when we talk about response times, that in any business, whether it be the ambulance business or whether in any business, response time is always an important issue. But in most cases, people come at a point and saying, this is our response time. Somebody says, is it good or is it bad? Well, for whatever reason, if you're the one that's doing it, you think it's pretty good, if you think it's good. Now, you mentioned a national standard, but of course, that's like saying I've got 1 foot in boiling water, 1 foot in ice water, and an average ought to feel good, you know. I mean, in other words, it just doesn't, I get worried about applying national averages to any community, particularly Nantucket.
Right.
So I guess the question, what is it, do you have a specific objective around when we say we're going to reduce response times? That's like,
Right, we're going to be better, right. The national response time standard is arrival location within 5 minutes, 90% of the time. So from the time of the call to the on location time, you want to be 5 minutes or less, 90% of the time. We're at 5 minutes or less, 40% of the time. So we want to be better, we want to come closer, as close as we can to approaching that.
yeah, during the summertime, you see that gets pretty problematic. And most communities around the country don't have a summertime like we have. That's what I meant when I said it's hard to necessarily, there are some objectives you can put down which you could double the size of your staff and still not achieve, right? Because
It would be feasible to staff for a summer population year round. So part of the 4-year plan is to train and
you're gonna start doing that?
We would like to start doing that, yes. That's the part of the plan.
I didn't see anything in the budget.
No, that's a couple of years down the road. That's
Okay.
2019, FY 2019.
Now, that by itself could get you a lot closer to your response time.
It will help response time. It will also lower overtime for the summer. We can put
Yeah.
college kids on and increase our staff, and our overtime for the summer will go down with that option. And that's what we'd like to do. We'd like to make it the Explorer program, so we'd like to make it our high school kids who have housing on the island, we'd like to train them through high school to be firefighter 1 to EMT level, and hopefully have them work in the community while they're in college.
If response time was a big issue for me, I'd probably want to get going on that pretty quick.
Absolutely, I agree. And it's possible we could try to do something next year with it, which is, it's one of our priorities, and it's on the list. It's,
Okay.
we try to stage over a 2-year, 4-year period rather than this work.
So, anything else,
Is
Craig?
there an Explorer program now?
We do, we've got 6 people in our Explorer program. We'd like to expand it and bring more kids in. There was some place before I got here, fire prevention officer, was in and shot, but now one of the
Joe?
Quick numbers question, the 590,000 for the ambulances, that's in the ambulance revolving fund? And then, I guess it gets layered onto the overall departmental budget, so it shows up there too.
I mean,
It's the same,
in
it's
the
the,
funding source is just the ambulance reserve for
Yeah.
everything.
okay, so it just gets kind of, okay. Thank you.
David?
Another numbers question, there's a big uptick in professional services from the 16 budget to the 17 proposed budget.
That's, part of the plan is to train 10 of our own EMTs at the paramedic level. Administration has decided to stage over a 2-year period, so we're going to train 5 EMTs at the paramedic level this coming fiscal year and 5 the next, so it's $125,000 to train 5 EMTs at the paramedic level. over a 1-year period.
So, let me just interject that have we completed all the review of your priorities you want to share? I think we've touched on the fire station project, ambulance, ALS,
Yes.
increased staffing, and the Explorers? Okay, so let's go back, let's now kind of go into the budget review. Did you want to make any opening comments on that, or did you want to just ask questions?
Sure, well, we already started talking professional services, so that increases to $125,000 for training for 5 EMTs at the paramedic level. That's where that 134% increase came from.
And so we'd see that again, the same, roughly 125,000 for the next wave.
Correct. The plan was to have that this year, the same 125,000 next year, and then after that, we're planning on a $25,000 budget line item for training. To train future EMTs at the paramedic level, to train explorers to the EMT level, to train call people at paramedic level, to build a workforce so that we have a place to hire from. Through attrition, we hire 4 off-island paramedics over a year period. There's a fair chance that we're not going to maintain all of them due to housing reasons over several years. We're hoping to continually upgrade our explorers and on-island labor resources.
So just so I understand, that's an incremental training cost from the level that your folks are at now to get to the paramedic level so that they can provide AOS?
Correct.
Okay.
It's still going to be negotiated with the union, but they are committed, at least kind of committed, they would like to take the training program. And they're going to do a lot of it on their own time. This is not overtime for every hour of training. They're going to make a personal financial commitment to the program on their own time with the training. We're going to cover part of it, cover the training and transportation costs.
So that needs to be in the pro forma, I'm assuming you'll end up helping do that. So-
Yeah, I mean, some of that training will be covered through his normal operating budget as well, so.
But the incremental stuff is what we need. So, any...
Yeah, we're talking about $140,000 of incremental training a year.
While we're on this subject of training, any
No, it's a year.
questions?
It's per year.
Just for 2 years, correct.
Any,
And then whatever attrition you end up having to plug in.
That's what we figure $25,000 a year after that for future training.
so while we're on the training topic, any questions on that? I had one, but training. I know this, a couple of years ago, because the town, as you know, has been thinking about this, and we've seen some earlier plans. There was a plan earlier to hire a full-time ALS paramedic trainer, and this, pardon?
EMS officer.
I'm not sure what the title was, but is that, so it sounds like you're going outside to have that service rather than having it, not making a judgment, I just want to clarify that.
Correct. We have not included an EMS officer or a
Okay.
training officer in this budget.
Okay, okay, that's fine, I just want to make sure it's not, all right.
No, it might be something down the road we'll talk about.
So again, on that like make versus buy, you must have done an analysis that said going outside was,
We're going to provide the service to the site. We're going to do provide the training and
oh,
the EMS officer function internally at the deputy chief level. We're going to, over the next year, we're going to.
so it was like a train the trainer, or is it,
So the EMS officer function that
Yep.
we talked about in the past was something
Right.
that would be quality control for medical reports.
right,
Help coordinate training.
Okay.
Provide all the training, but coordinate training.
right?
um,
But you said that's not in the budget, that's not,
in the budget, no, we were going to
okay,
disperse those duties among the management team we have right now.
Okay.
Over the next year, we'll be hiring, promoting a new deputy, retiring deputy. We just got a new administrative assistant, replaced one, not an additional one. We wanted to give it a year or so to see how these management functions all fell out and whether we could handle them all. We didn't want to go ahead and propose a new position until we were sure we really needed it. I'm not sure we need it yet.
so is the 140,000 or whatever the incremental cost of ALS, is that, who, is that contracted out with a third party, or?
120, there's 125,000 for training. The rest of that was just an incremental adjustment between years. The 125,000 is for training. We have two different options. An online option where we can pay, I think it was $7,000 to enroll a student in a paramedic online interactive program and send the student off island for so many hours
Okay.
of classroom training off
Okay.
island. And there's another service that will come in and provide online training for around $14,000 with
Okay.
instructors here.
All right, okay,
So it's a contracted out training.
all right, thank you.
We couldn't try to do it ourselves immediately.
No, no, I know, I just was, yeah,
The train at that level.
okay. John?
I'm hoping I'm not gonna change the subject, but.
No, go ahead, I just,
But overtime, somebody did ask a question about overtime, and that's always been a sore point over the 7 years that I've been on this committee. But I think at some point, after about 5, I started to understand what was creating the overtime. I'm a slow learner. But in this case, you're talking about a 10% increase, which that means it's just not business as usual. It's something's going on here that's a little different, because you're not, unless you're expecting an increase in volume of 10% or something like that.
No,
I just wondered, you came up with a 10% number, which seems, a year-to-year increase seems high after everything that we've just been discussing. I can see why it may not go down, but we're talking about 10% going up.
just the salary contractual requirements, our pay rates are going to go up, I think, close to 10%. Brian might know the number better than I know. But that was solely due, I think, 99% due to the increases in contract staff increases. It wasn't, it would be a slight amount to the increased call volume, but the salaries as a whole are going up by 9%.
right,
And that's just through contract. Not increases the number of hours of overtime.
okay.
The contractual increase is 9%.
3.8%, correct.
Because you got salary and overtime going up about the same percent.
It's going up about the same, yeah.
And it's no incremental hours, it's all rates.
Well, I understand what he said. I'm just,
I know, it's
I
just
got
saying-
caught on the salary thing,
Yeah, I
not on
understand,
not on the overtime
Right.
thing.
Firefighters with a 3-year contract, I think they're in year 2 of their 3-year contract, and this is part of that. I think they're, I don't have the contract in front of me, I think it's a 2% raise per year, they got something like that. So I think a lot of this is step increases,
Okay.
people that have been there longevity time.
other questions about the
Well-
expense budget?
No, Jim, I'm not finished.
Okay,
Yeah, because we're talking about, you've got a payroll, if you go to the line above it, you got a payroll increase of 8.8%. In that is a couple of extra people. So if we pull those out, you know, you'd probably got maybe a 6%. And so if your salary is going up 6%, your overtime is going up 10%, all I'm saying is that there's something else going on
Well,
there.
I think, John, if you actually, if I can just make a comment to that question, I think if you look at the historical average for the last 3 years, we spent in excess of $400,000, and in 16 we budgeted 380. So I think one of the goals was to increase overtime as we potentially go down this ALS road to reflect somewhat of a more actual number than what we had been budgeted. If you look at last year, in fiscal 15, we used $404,000 in overtime. Fiscal 14, 403, and fiscal 13, 458. And so averaging that, that's in excess of $400,000 annually in overtime when we had been budgeting around 300,000. So some of this overtime change is a result of trying to be more
So
predictive of what has been going on.
our budget last year really wasn't really.
Wasn't really 380. I mean, we ended up.
Yeah, the budget was 380, but the
Right,
actual is going to be
right. So
higher than that.
One of the things that we, in
Gotcha.
discussion with the chief, we tried to do is look at it and say, is 380 realistic? Because we're not really spending 380, we're spending over 400.
Well, that's a question I had, where we were for the first 6 months of this year on it. That was my next question right off the bat.
We can actually, I can get into that. You know, some of the other part of that increase with overtime would also be from the contractual raises that everybody would be entitled to change the overtime rate, so that would be.
Well, I
a
understand.
portion of that would be where that would be coming from too.
Yeah. But the question I had was, in the first 6 months of,
And we're gonna look it up right now.
okay, I'd just be interested to see.
Yeah. Yes.
So I just have a point of clarification. I heard the chief say there were no incremental hours I heard the chief say there were no incremental hours, man-hours, in the budget?
We weren't counting on increase in overtime hours for next year.
Oh, overtime hours, okay.
Sorry.
So looking at your personnel spreadsheet, can you tell me, because it says 0 new positions requested. So tell me where the incremental, where is your FTE change from year to year?
You mean where are the extra 2 positions or 2.5 positions for next year? Where are they?
Yep. To FY 2017 personnel spreadsheet. It says new positions requested 0. And you only have 1 vacancy. Pardon me?
There's 2 TBDs in the one that
So that number becomes 30? No, 28, yeah, that number becomes 30
You got
FTEs?
2, yeah.
Between the ambulance reserve fund and there's all this, we seem to change our numbers all over the place.
Year-to-date overtime right now is just under $200,000.
You said it was about 200, you said?
About $200,000,
Yeah, now that included summer,
yes.
where the next 6 months does not include the summer?
Correct. We're in good shape this year for meeting the budget. We're keep an eye on that.
Okay.
So as long as we don't have crazy high winter storms, we should be under 400,000 this year for overtime. So last year we're over.
Yeah, so, okay. So we get back to the same question, and that is that if we think we're gonna be under it, we may not be at 380, but we're gonna be somewhat under 400, you think?
We'll probably be under 400 this year, but like I said, just for step raises and contractual increases, it's going to be 8.8% the salary next year. So theoretically, Ryan, it's full pension, 8.8% high too, right? Something in that range.
I wouldn't go wrong for one, but
Okay.
I mean, I would hesitate to say that we're gonna be under 400,000 before June 30th, given what we have had over the last 3 years and still with 6 months to go.
Yeah.
I would have to do it week by week and do it, I'll
Yeah.
find out, but.
Yeah, the only thing, if it's under if it's at 400 for the first 6 months, I would assume the second 6 months should be lower than the first 6 months, because you don't have the summer months in there.
Depending on snow level, but, you know.
But I'd also think, John, if I may, if, I'm assuming a lot of your staff takes vacation maybe during the winter, which may increase your OT. So it's not
Actually,
something that's a direct
one of the
relationship.
major increases in OT is towards the end of the year. Our firefighters in May, they use up vacation up by the end of the year, they carry it over. So at the end of the year, they all start using their vacation up, and overtime actually goes up in
Yeah.
May and June.
That's what I would think.
You gotta sit over there.
Happens to me in real life.
Any other,
Yeah, I guess I'm a
other
little
questions?
puzzled, because I look at the permanent salary, and then I look further down, that we budget for education incentive, longevity pay, et cetera, and so those, I guess, those should be incremental to the permanent salary number. So I guess I come back to John's question. I think his question was, it's going up 10%, but it looks like it's going up 10% on the base salary and maybe shift differentials, but when you look at the shift differentials, I didn't do out the, step differentials, excuse me, or step increases, is that the full $175,000 tied up in step differentials? Because everything else has got its own line item.
So I made the assumption that the two incremental FTEs are in that number. Okay, so 104 of that is the two new people, right?
But I thought we just said they weren't included in the personnel listing.
No, they added wrong. So they should have been in there. Yeah, in the body, it's correct. So of the 8, most of that, 100, like I said, 104 is or so. Because you're getting 2 FTEs for the whole year. You're just getting 2 and then 2 more. So it's really actually it's really 2.5, right? 3. It's actually 3. Okay, so so that's really 3 FTEs.
All right, so the math works.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, actually, what we should probably, I think that's there may be some confusion. The 2 positions in this budget are anticipated, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I understood that they are actually projected to be paramedics. There are 2
Right.
here,
Right.
and then there will be 2 in January that will be hired out of the ambulance reserve fund. So there are, actually the ALS program, there are positions in here beginning July 1st,
Right.
which he was talking about. So I
Right.
want to make sure everybody understands.
Yeah, for a total of 3 for the fiscal year.
There's a current vacancy, yes, so there's 3. So the total is 27 within the general fund budget.
Okay.
So
Anything else on the fire department budget? Chief, any comments you want to make to us or questions of us? All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Welcome, Chief Pittman. Maybe we can do the same as we did with the fire chief, just kind of going over your strategic initiatives for the upcoming year and the challenges you face in meeting the mission of your department.
Okay.
They can't answer.
Chairman, your report, thanks for the opportunity once again. I think the very first thing
kind of an introduction to something that's new on the very first page of the spreadsheet, which is this one here, is you'll notice we're identifying the department different than before. We're actually looking at the conglomeration of different core functions that we've been involved in, and under the one banner of public safety here. So within the public safety budget for you, you've got the different functions that we're talking about, which is police, obviously probably the biggest single expense, but then there's the harbor master, emergency management. The newest member of our team here is the Division of Business Licensing, which Amy Baxter over there is one of the newest members of the department, also works in business licensing, and Division of Emergency Communications and Information Technology. This particular section is really a shared section between police and fire to a big extent. The resources that go into it are shared by both police and fire for communications, for our IT network, most of your data processing expenses. So a lot of the expenses you'll see in that, in the police side, in terms of data processing, are really, and communications are really for both departments, major departments. So that's the biggest, newest thing for public safety this year. Our goals for the department, for the law enforcement and police side, we've been approached by the school to increase the staffing in our school resource officer program at the school. I think right now the superintendent and I have both agreed that this is something that we'll probably talk about more next year for FY18. But when we started this process, we really had some pretty good discussions about trying to get it in place this year. Because the campus is so spread out and there are so many different potential issues out there today, to include drugs, safety, campus safety, things like that, that we do address on a regular basis, that we think it's something we need to discuss more. We have lost our motor unit, which is 2 officers, both of them that we've had for prior years, either got promoted or have left to other departments. So we're hoping to get a couple officers and get them trained to get our motor unit once again going, which is a very useful unit in the summertime. The motorcycles. Training is becoming a big focus with the changes in the country over the last year. The President's 21st Century Study on Policing has put forth a bunch of recommendations that the way this thing works typically in law enforcement is that they won't tell you you have to do them, but if you don't do them and something goes wrong, you're answering in court as to why you didn't do that. You're behind the 8 ball. So a lot of this came down to we've got to ensure that our training is consistent with the goals put forward by the 21st Century Policing Plan. And I'm happy to say that in most cases we are there or far in advance of what this group came up with and said we need to do. And I can talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. Also, we're reconstituting the accident reconstruction team. We've had an officer who is the deputy chief that has served as a reconstruction officer for a number of years, but it's been a long time since he's been to training. We had trained another officer to help him. It really takes more than one person to reconstruct a major accident. And that officer left us and went to Wellesley after we trained him. So we're looking to find another officer that we can train and prepare for another department, hopefully not. But to help with the accident reconstruction. This became very critical in several recent, Robin Harvey's accident is a good example of where that resource was needed. It was late. We weren't able to get support from off island because of numerous, I think the weather was issues and other things. And it really brought home that we need to, once again, get that talent back in the department. Harbor master goals.
Bill, I just, on the staffing relative to adding a school resource officer to the elementary school.
Yes.
Somehow, you know, I can certainly see it at the high school, and you have it there. Elementary school?
Well, the goal really is to have two SROs to the campus, for the campus. One would primarily be dedicated to the high school, the other to the elementary school, but then they share the duties between them. Yeah, the elementary school has a lot of things that SROs deal with. Remember the old DARE programs?
Yeah.
Those were targeting fifth graders. So, you know, this is not something that we've been able to do. We don't do the DARE program anymore, but there's other programs that we do that the guy at the high school goes over and does at the elementary school now. So, you know, it's never too early to get the envision. Now, the further up in the educational environment they go, for instance, the high school, the more law enforcement related the interaction is with the students. But we're doing things there at the high school now that we're actually teaching a semester-long course in criminal justice. The SRO there is actually doing regular training now, where before they weren't doing that. So there's just, law enforcement's getting way more involved now in the educational system, which is consistent with what, you know, the President's Task Force said they want done. And we've already started doing it way before this all came on.
Does the SRO get involved with bullying, training,
what?
anti-bullying issues,
Yep.
or?
Yep.
So that's
Bullying,
certainly an element of an elementary school.
Yeah, and it's very much so. There's just, you'd be surprised how much activity there is at an elementary school. And to be honest with you, what where we really find ourselves involved in more in the schools that I'm shocked actually, was the foreign language students to a big extent. You know, we're building big inroads into that community through the school districts with the officers at the school. You know, we're in contact many times with a lot of the parents for different things. It's all positive. It's helped build some relationships with the Spanish teachers on the island that had not been for the school and the programs they had, it would have been difficult for us to get into those kind of communities. So,
Chief, do we ever install the, I know we had a capital project for the lockdown after the school, everybody enters it, we put a wall up and a door.
they're still working on that. They've done some things. They've made access control to the building now, so it's all locked. Police officers all have access with our cards to get in at any time, but the building's generally all locked down now. Some of the areas, I can't remember the timeline, it's coming up. On the middle school, they're going to be building what do you call that, intermediary coming in to give a way to kind of trap somebody that's coming in to do harm into the school. But it is in their construction plans. I think they ran, if I'm not mistaken, they ran into some contractor issues in the cost, and then had to come back and rethink it and redo some of the stuff on it. But it just delayed it.
Correct.
Yeah. The Harbor Masters goals. We really want to get our lifeguard program, which is really is a top-notch program. We're seeking USLA, United States Life Saving Association certification for it. And why that's important is because it's not really that much of a cost issue. It requires us to do certain skills that they don't currently do. For instance, oxygen therapy is one of the requirements, different things like that. We've now got an agreement with the hospital where the lifeguards and the ATV officers can carry oxygen and administer it. There'll be training for that. Why this is important is because right now lifeguards are one of the hardest seasonal employees to recruit in all of New England. And a USLA program has to step up, because if you get into an 9-year veteran of our lifeguard program. She's very familiar with the beaches. She's I don't know, a lifelong Nantucket resident, but a long-time Nantucket resident. Her family's here, very familiar with the natural resource requirements, and has a real keen interest in keeping our beaches and our waterfronts, in pristine condition. Aids to navigation, we're looking, I think, at about $45,000 in funding that we're applied for in 40 infrastructure grants funds to implement a wintertime ice buoy system. Right now, we pull all the buoys out in the winter, and it's kind of a free-for-all out there for where you go and where you don't go. Not so much a problem in the harbor, but anybody trying to navigate up around Nantucket, in that area, it can be a real problem. And the problem comes when Sheila and her crew have to go up there and get people that have gotten themselves stuck in shoals and everything. So what this system will do is right now they go out and they pull them and they put them in. Now they'll just go out and they'll switch a summer buoy for a winter buoy. They're different. They slide under the ice if it freezes and don't get pulled up and lost. So it's about a $45,000 grant. Town pier, with funding approved, we hope to implement the first year of an ongoing maintenance plan. One of the major reasons we had $1.1 million or whatever it was in damage to the town pier last year in that storm was because we had 20 or 30 years of very little maintenance done to that pier. And many of the cross bracing, the other things were just not capable of withstanding the forces that it was put against. So what we're hoping to do here, we have an engineer who is developing a timeline plan for us, telling us that, this year you should do this, 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 and this, next year this, 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 and this, every 5 years you should do this and this. And with that plan, we hope to do incremental improvements every year so that the pier is always in good condition. It's almost an exact duplicate of what the boat basin does with their facility over there. You see the people there this year doing maintenance on the pilings and everything else. They do that every year, and that's how they avoid having a $1.1 million expense because of something like this. So it's long overdue, and we'll get it going.
Bill, you said that's going to, has that started, or it's going to start, or?
Well, this fiscal year we're in now, we've paid for and are having an engineer develop the plan. Next fiscal year, we hope to get the money added to our budget. The money's coming out of the waterways fund, but we're getting the spending authority to be able to implement it.
Okay.
The actual cost. And what's about $75,000 a year.
So next summer it should be going with it.
It should be going with it, yeah. And we do have some money set aside for this year for some of the stuff. So, as soon as we learn, some of the stuff's obvious, some planking on the surface. Sheila can see that every day. But some of the stuff is not so obvious, like worm boards and pilings, bracing that's not proper. Last year, after we had all that rebuilt, I don't know how many times the sewer pipes break last winter, and all that would have taken, the engineer can say, go with a little hammer, knock a hole in it just like that, it's rotten. It's little things like that aren't so obvious that will be on this plan that we'll be able to periodically repair.
Yeah.
So to the committee, feel free to ask questions as we're going along.
Emergency communications information technology group of goals. Again, training plan. The state tells us every year with dispatchers what we have to train in. But there's many other things, especially with the fire department and the role that they play with their ground command, their fire command, and everything, that aren't necessarily mandated trainings for dispatchers that we really need them to train, and that's why Melinda's working with the deputy chief of the fire department and the police department. We're looking at these extra things that we need to put into a training plan so we can stretch our dollars out and make sure all the dispatchers have the opportunity to get additional training. I think they're required to do 16 hours of training that the state says they have to do, and that's typically things like on the 911 system, emergency medical know what yet, but some kind of a plan, a program that's focused on the dispatchers for looking out for their stress management. Outreach and ability to communicate with our Spanish speakers. We're doing this in several ways. We're doing it using technology. Anybody ever tried to use Google Translator? You get some pretty funny things up there when you do that. But there is technology out there that is available to us at relatively little or no cost. It's just a matter of finding it and getting, applying for the grants for it. Also, we put a focus on new dispatchers. Spanish-speaking capability is a real significant bonus on a new dispatcher. Right now, I have 2 dispatchers that speak fluent Spanish. One is, very fluent in Portuguese, Spanish language, and the other in Jamaican communication and stuff, and the Caribbean Spanish language. So, we're focusing on that with the dispatching staff to try to help bridge that gap between police, fire, and our immigrant community. Next Gen 911, we expect to transition to that. It's a no-cost thing to the town, but it will be a significant change in the way our 911 operators manage the system. Basically, in a nutshell, Next Gen enhances some of these communications devices for non-English speakers, but it also allows people to text emergency messages to 911 systems. So that will require probably a significant, not only training for our dispatchers, but community training too. Public safety, our goals for our emergency management this year. Now that we have the plans in place for the fire department, and we have, this building's in place, one lesson we learned from Juneau last year when the finance department went out of business essentially because of the storm. And, the town came together and we worked and we found another place to work and we got them up, back running pretty quickly. But it really illuminated the fact that we really have no plans in our emergency management section for dealing with what they call continuity of operations. And so we're systematically now going to go through each of the different major functions of the town. We're starting with public safety. If something happens to this building, something happens to, part of this building, how are we going to continue to operate? Where's our alternate 911 service? And how is that going to be put into service if we have to move it? The fire department has a contamination of their structure. Where are they going to go? There's options. We just got to make sure they're available. And we've got to make sure we got MOUs in place to make sure that we can go to those places, things like that. It's a pretty significant exercise that we're undergoing. Training, we've been involved in, and we'll continue to be involved in live tabletop emergency preparedness exercises, both here in the island and involved in other case departments. And we're also looking to, we have a lot of memorandums of understanding out there between police, fire, and everybody else, the Red Cross, everything else, and there's not one single place in this town that has all of them in one spot, so we can kind of manage them and make sure they're current and know what they, where they are in the event we need them in a hurry to look up what we got to do. Emergency management's taken on that role to accumulate all that, catalog them, put them in a particular file, so if there's something that has to be renewed every year, or reviewed every year, even it can be done. Basically, the 2 things that for police, let's see, I'm going to skip a little bit here. Okay, and go to just our priorities as a department, the public safety department. We have really 3 priorities. Community safety is number 1.
It's called Priorities All Divisions?
Yes, priorities all divisions. Community safety is number 1. Everything we do, we review to see what the impact on safety in the community is going to be. Community access is number 2. We're really making an effort to try to put into place systems that the public can gain better access to the public safety departments, or the information the public safety departments have, which for the most part is what the real key is. As an example, right now, very soon, people will be able to look on the website and look at copies of entertainment and business licenses for all the different establishments on the island. staff support. I've mentioned a couple times training plans and wellness plans. We're really going to put a focus this year on our staff. Significant changes, the reorganization that we've been going through here, we're taking on now business licensing. That significantly enhanced our ability to deal with licensed establishments. It's going to be able to solve, now this is a several-year process, but it's going to be able to solve a lot of the simple little problems that seem simple, but they're not. For instance, an officer gets complaining about loud music in an establishment, and he's told by, he looks at the business license and it says, they're allowed to have background music and this and that and everything else, as they're standing there listening to a live band, going on in the establishment. What's frustrated us is many times, I've been in the selectmen's meeting on Wednesday night, I hear a description by an applicant for a business license, for an entertainment license, and what they talk about is we got a fine dining establishment with background music, a porch out there for people to go smoke, and not bother anybody, this and that. But then what they forget to tell everybody is at 10 o'clock at night, all the chairs go aside, and now it's a nightclub. Our goal is to make sure that whatever the board votes on is or whatever's actually going to happen here is what the board is advised of and votes on. It's up to them what they want to allow, but we want to make sure they have all the information before them. And we think now with this unified group, we'll be able to make sure that that information gets brought forward in a more organized way. It's a step. Staffing, we all have staffing problems. Housing is obviously a problem. One of the, I want to go back to a significant accomplishment this year that I was able to do because it does touch the budget and how it touches staffing. This year I had 3 detectives. First time since 2009, I think, or 2008, I've had 3 detectives. The result of that was we were able to solve, to a good part, we were able to solve the sexual assault cases that were happening because I had guys that were able to spend hours and hours, not stalking,
Do what you have to do, Bill,
hours and hours, but, trailing people, gathering evidence, interviews, things like that. This is not something we're able to do in the past with the shortages, manpower shortage. But last year, I had almost entirely full year, a whole year of full staffing. That in part was due to a different way we're doing hiring now and training. Now we're hiring as we have vacancies. The town manager has allowed us to, when we have an anticipated vacancy, to pre-hire an individual to the academy with a conditional job offer that says it's contingent on A, a vacant position, and B, funding for that position. And we've been able to get people into the academies, and so we haven't gone through the 1-year cycles like we have in the past where we've had vacancies while somebody's at the academy. Now, it's worked out for the most part. It worked great last year. This year, I'm already down 3 bodies, but I already have 3 people, either 2 in the academy right now and 1 anticipating to go to an academy in February. Right now, there's 2 vacancies that are confirmed. The people are gone. And there's a 3rd one that I expect to be confirmed shortly. But those were created by 2 officers. One went to other departments, and 1 officer that's a veteran officer had a medical issue that had to go out on retirement. So, we were up for a while. I'm going to try to keep the detectives squad together. But one of the vacancies that's created now is it will be a detective short. So, we're just going to start focusing on heroin again, now that we got those other cases out of the way, and so it really becomes important to have the bodies to do that.
Excuse me, Chief
Yes.
Pittman. So on your folks going to the academy, I recall in prior sessions, are we requiring, I'm going to use the word contract, it's perhaps not the right word, but are we requiring a commitment on the part of people that go through the academy to give, okay, so, and is there any clawback if they don't?
Yes, there's, I can't remember what the term is, but basically if it's for breach of contract, they don't give us 3 years, there's a $10,000 breach of contract penalty. And right now, they go without exception, they all say they really don't want to leave the department because they've had opportunities they wouldn't get in other departments. It's just all about the housing and the cost of living here. It really is. Permitting, significant and complicated changes in our various permitting requirements have increased the complexity of the process. Residential parking permits, there's just so many different permits now that it's very difficult for almost one person to handle. We actually got one full-time and one part-time person that are dealing with it now, but I don't see an end to that anytime soon. The two major cost centers for the department are in the spreadsheet, are in the packet next. Our police department budget and the harbor master budget. Selectmen like to see the marine side separate so they know what kind of money's going into that. If there's any specific questions about some issues dealing with that, I'd be happy with budget. I'd be happy to entertain it.
Yeah, Bill?
Question.
Yeah, maintenance, 16% up and here we have a fairly new building.
Yep, and a good portion of the increase is this building. The building, for all practical purposes, 5 or 6 years old now. Warranties expired, things are breaking. We're wanting to do some painting on the trim, which in some places around the building, is starting to peel. Some of that is, the construction, new construction will be taking place here. Some of it we don't need to fix because it will be taken off, but now's the time that, we want to stay on top of it rather than wait until the building's falling apart and needs major repairs. But last week when we were here, you saw, that was a $1,200 smoke screen the other night. So, when that projector went up. And that's the second one. And the funny thing is, we lost the one downstairs, a month ago. So it just reached its end of its life, both of them.
Programmed obsolescence.
Yeah.
Joe?
Chief, on the harbor master budget, there's actually a pretty significant decline in professional services, $176,000 in this.
Yeah, that was because this year we paid for a couple of things. There was some engineering studies that had to do with dredging, pier, mainly dredging, children's beach, things like that were all put in there, and that we won't need that next year.
Just projects that aren't being
Right, right.
Cliff, yeah.
Chief?
Yep.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Go ahead.
I'm just looking at the salaries from 2013 to 2017. They go from $4 million to $5,300,000.
Are you looking at the detail or the overall?
I guess the overall total police department. Is that just a combination of we've combined all the departments and?
Yeah, this spreadsheet here. It's only a 5%. It's only
From
last year to this year. It's a $280,000 increase. Is that what you were asking?
Well, it's just like from 13 to 17, it's like 25% or something. I guess it would be if you added $1,300,000 from 4 million. So I'm just trying to figure we've added central dispatch and we've added.
Well, I think part of that was, I don't think that was so much dispatch, but I think, during that time, we've added the business licensing folks to our department. We've added some clerical staff, the permitting people downstairs. Oh, okay, it is dispatchers can do that. Oh, okay, and the dispatchers, I guess.
Yeah. I assume it was the dispatchers,
Dave? John?
Yeah, the supplies are another one that why would supplies just, I'm sure there's a reason, I just don't know what it is.
So a $6,400 increase in supplies?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not, it's just various things. It's in part this building too. We get the cleaning supplies for the cleaners. We do that. We have other buildings that we are looking out for. The Harbor Master's building, the lifeguard housing the Loran building, all these things that, you know, we use little things for, come under here. So, you know, when you spread it out through all these buildings, it's not necessarily that much money. It's probably just regular increases. There's no one single thing that's being added that much money.
Same question on the other line there, that's tends to run instead of 160, 170,000, and then you're looking for 227,000 for fiscal 17.
Which one's that?
The lowest line on the police department budget, chief, the 227 up $57,000, 34%. Just curious if it gets dumped into.
That's your slush fund,
Other?
Okay, the expense increase request.
other.
All the other stuff.
Okay, yeah, I mean, those are the EIRs, that would be, everything's gone up for us. There's a couple of reasons. Postage is doubled, advertising has quadrupled, not only in the amount of advertising we're doing, but in the cost of what we're doing.
Yeah.
PC replacement. Oh, yeah, then, because of the winter time tow restrictions, we've added some money to the budget to pay for, towing that we have to do it for snow emergency routes and things. I think in prior years, we had $300 in the towing budget, now we've got several thousand.
So I on your FY17 personnel spreadsheet, 44 positions, no new, I want to verify this, you're not asking for any new positions and you have no vacancies?
Well, we're asking for, yes. What we've asked for is a couple of things. In between police and fire, we've asked for some upgrades of positions. One is a administrative assistant, that was the S1 level, which is the lowest we can be. A job review has revealed that position was being asked to do a lot more technical work than what an S1 is doing, so we asked that to be upgraded to an S2. I think that was a $9,000 increase, something like that.
I'm just focusing on the FTEs, so on your, so it's, I just want to clarify. Pardon me?
We can correct that.
So what should it be? The 44, I just want to verify, you've got currently 44 FTEs, and you have no vacancies, and you have no new positions in this budget.
Well, I don't have vacancies because I've got people hired.
Okay, I just want to make sure, Clint. So,
Yeah,
okay.
no, there's 36 full-time officers.
Okay,
And
yeah,
I think those numbers are right
okay, good.
for the police.
Yeah, let's look at the,
Yeah, I had a question about the vehicle expense, the 185. Does that include any new vehicles, or is that all maintenance?
No, that, the 185?
Yeah.
That's new.
That is-
We generally replace, schedule at least 2 to 3 new replacements in our fleet every year.
Okay.
And then the way it works out every other year, something like that, we're able to slip in a fourth when you do it across the budget, across the years. So no, we pretty much, because we purchase new vehicles and we purchase extended warranties with them, we're keeping the maintenance costs on the other end down. But right now, the fleet is probably the best it's ever been in a long time.
Okay. Yeah, I did it before, it's just, good. Thank you for that.
other questions? No? John?
Yeah, under the Marine,
Okay.
I see the maintenance is up. Is that sort of a continuation of trying to get out of where you were?
And which, are you in the?
Marine,
Yeah, okay, repair and maintenance, 41,000. Yes, I think that's mainly boats. We've got one. Oh, yeah, under repair and maintenance. No, it's, I think it is, yes, it is, that's right, that's the big increase for the maintenance on the town pier. So, that we're gonna do the extra funding.
that's right.
Yeah.
Any questions? No? Those who haven't asked a question, David?
If somebody wants to add.
No, I just want to.
Looking at the personnel list, on I'll call it longevity, but,
For police.
yeah, class and step, this is jumping ahead to actually a year from now, but it looks like you've got, am I correct in interpreting that there's gonna be about 7 officers that are gonna hit the 36-month window?
Yeah, it looks that way.
Uh,
Well, this budget, it shows what they're gonna be on July first.
First, so a year from now, or a year from July 1st.
Right.
And so, do you routinely have a program to keep them from jumping ship? Because, I mean, clearly, as you've said before,
Yeah.
turnover is an expensive.
You know, I kind of came to this conclusion a long time ago, that the reasons they're leaving are reasons that I really can't do anything about. I mean, last year I lost 2 10-year veterans, and why is that? And quite frankly, they stood here and said it's because I can buy a 3-bedroom house on a half-acre of land over in the Cape.
Right.
And if you can help me do that here in Nantucket, I'd be happy to stay. That's beyond my power and ability to do that. And the other thing, if you notice, a lot of these guys are fairly young, these officers. Another thing that drives them or pulls them away are relationships. They fall in love with somebody, they get married. Now I got the double problem of not only do we have to try to keep them employed, but we got to try, the other half of the relationship has got job issues and gets pulled away. And, I've lost officers because their spouse got a job that paid more money as a physician's assistant at another, on the Cape or something. So those are things I can't deal with. But what I did decide to do was create a department that they're going to have to think hard about leaving because, they're going to be involved in so many different things. They're going to be given opportunities to learn skills. And it is a tough decision for them when they finally make that decision. And they'll always tell us the hard thing is we really like the department. And, at least they're not saying I couldn't wait to get out of here. Finally got a job in Dennis, that kind of thing. But many of them go to Dennis. I actually had a Cape chief, believe it or not. One of the chiefs on the Cape last year came to me and said, how about if we give you our hiring list that we create, and you guys hire them, and then, after, I'll guarantee you have them for like 3 years, then I can take them as I hire them. I said, what's the benefit to me? And it was, it was pretty gutsy of him, but he was, with a straight face, he thought that was a good idea.
So I think we've heard a lot of presentations about the issue of housing. I just have a question for Libby. Is there some kind of a risk profile you've thought about, or as you think about turnover for all employees, the impact of housing shortages and the cost of it? And have you assessed that within them? Have you done a questionnaire or? Okay.
We did do a housing survey a year and more ago, and asked probably to all employees. And I don't know if the response was great, but I think we have a general sense of who could use stable housing and who is likely to leave overall within a certain period of time, and we're going to have to either deal with the housing issue or get better housing.
Because I know the town's thinking about considering a long-term, but I think this is going to be an issue that's going to face the community, and I think thinking about some short-term, 1 or 2 year, 3 year solutions, or at least taking a look at that might be helpful.
Yeah, I think that, I'm not sure how long-term we're looking. I think we're looking to develop property here,
Right.
more short-term than long-term.
Okay, but I think it'd be 3 years before you could, 2 or 3 years before you could occupy it, and I think that's, I guess, what I'm thinking about, an interim plan. That's just a suggestion, interim plan to get you to that point. So,
Question for the chief, or perhaps the harbor master. I noticed in the report that the amphibious boat was brought online this past year. Was it used for any service? Was it put into service to?
We put several hours on it underway for training, and we had one
on the Public Safety Department? Thank you, Chief. Great job. Thank you. So we have, I did want to, there was one item on the citizen article that we want to discuss, that we had some questions last time. So in my thinking, we're getting, as I said last time, we'll be getting more information from Andrew and the planning board on the zoning articles and the real estate articles as they come forward in the next 30 days or so. We did have, and we are going to take up the cost reimbursement article, citizen article. If you want to recuse yourself.
Sure.
So we, at last meeting, we distributed from Leslie the email with the state building department building code appeals board ruling on this matter, and this is the matter that's been brought forward to us via the citizen article. I thought I would make a couple of introductory comments, and then we can open up to questions. And I'd like to put some, collars around the conversation today, if I could. I think if we ask questions, we want to talk in general about the process, and my own view is that we should, since this is not a, and we can debate this, but this is not a topic that involves town funds, and we're not making recommendations about town funds. This is it seems to be a private matter, and we've got some, and it's going through, a history. It's going through a process with the town and now with the state. But I'm certainly, and Libby's here to speak if there are questions you have about, because there were questions last time about the process that we go through, or the town goes through in reviewing these items. And as I said last time, whoever is kind of weighing in on this subject, it needs to be, this needs to be with the professional decorum that I spoke about at the last meeting. So I'll just open it up for questions that people might have. Did you all got a chance to read this, I hope?
Yep.
And as you remember, the town council made town council's view on this is that this article is not for the benefit of the town. Is that the correct term?
Yeah.
And it is not illegal. And we talked about the fact that while we may not have an option other than to take that action, we wanted to have an opportunity to discuss it today if anyone felt that they wanted to. So. But I would like to take a motion on this article at the end of our conversation.
I'm not sure what to add to the conversation, Jim. I mean, based on what I've read and Cliff's testimony at our other meeting, and it's an unfortunate situation. I think it's certainly an unfortunate situation for Cliff. But it seems, as far as the finance committee, our hands are pretty well tied. I mean, it's not an appropriate disbursement or use of town funds, and I'm not sure how else we as the finance committee can get involved in Cliff's dispute with the town.
Where I see it is, I agree with what Joe is saying. I see there's two levels. That's one level. The other level is that is this an opportunity for this committee to explore some irregularities that have occurred with the building department and that have made it more onerous for the citizens and for the taxpayers. I don't know if there's something that we can do or not. That's my concern.
So as I said, we can certainly ask the town manager about the process, actions that have been taken to date in response to those. Is that, would you like to, would you want to have that?
Oh, sure, that's fine, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I'm
All
just,
right.
yeah. and-
So, Libby, do you want to just, I know we've had, when the, when Andrew and Leslie were here, they spoke to how response time, and maybe you might want to speak to the incremental staff you've added and that's happened, how that's changed the response time, improved response times?
That is really a level of detail that I haven't spent a lot of time.
Oh, okay, okay,
Other than a monthly meeting with Andrew where we
Okay.
talk about staffing issues.
okay,
Of course, we regularly review the budget and what
okay.
personnel needs are
Right.
needed and should
Okay.
I'm aware of their incremental stuff.
Right.
I don't know, what the regularities have been.
When I speak about regularity, it's more anecdotal for the past few years, with various complaints from individuals on how their experiences with building inspector. I have in my position previously, but, again, it wasn't our business, so I just, one way or the other. You'd be surprised.
Oh, no,
You'd be
yeah.
very
that's-
surprised at what the complaints were.
But to that point, we did hear from Leslie and from Andrew that an incremental building inspector has been hired. They spoke to their competence, their skill. And one measure was that the levels of concerns expressed by the Home Builders Association. Leslie regularly meets with that staff, or those groups, and their levels of concern have declined, and the turnaround time, the response time with the incremental staff person has increased. So, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the testimony we received last time. Any other questions? So Cliff, would you like to? This is your. Would you like to make any comments or?
Simplify it.
Okay.
Confusing situation. Basically, the only thing standing between you and your civil liberties to build on private property, permit process here down in Nantucket. And if they can't facilitate a permit after 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, it's a problem. If that individual has done everything, trusted them, paid the permit, with certain expectations, you have to spend money, spend the time, fill out the documentation, you should be getting a permit. And that is the law. So, where do you go? When do you do? Why hasn't it been resolved? Resolve it right now. So, I'm gonna take it to the court of public opinion, because I've dealt with the courts and whatever courts those are downtown, district courts, civil courts. I'm not too impressed by it, so I thought I'd take it to town meeting and allow them to decide.
All right. Well, I appreciate your bringing the subject to us. We've spent, I think we've all, we've spent a lot of time and thoughtful time trying to understand it, and appreciate your being here to participate in that and give us your thoughts. John, did you have another?
Well, I just, listening to Cliff, and I know what I read. I mean, the communication that we got from where there was an appeal, and your appeal was turned down. I read it, and it seemed like they had logical conclusions on turning it down. So the question is, if that's incorrect, I have no knowledge right now to know that if their conclusions are incorrect, I'll be darned if I can. There's nothing, as Cliff has said, has told me that these are incorrect. And if they're not incorrect, then as far as I'm concerned, that's it. So it gets down to the fact that either these people are incorrect in their conclusion or they're not.
And all we can do as a committee, I believe, is to accept what the professionals have, have recommended, and we did accept that as a document. And I think, I'm not sure what other action we could take that would be within the purview of this committee. So,
Yeah, other than the fact that the town council said it's not appropriate for us to deal with it anyway.
any other?
I made the point at the last meeting that, my concern as a member of this committee, and I think maybe the only thing that this committee should consider is if there is some liability to the town for some mishandling of this situation or any situation. If there's a habitual or systemic problem, then, we should, I think at that point, recommend that the Board of Selectmen or the town manager look into that problem. At this point, town council's told us that this issue in particular is not one for which the town's liable to pay any money. And, notwithstanding Cliff's testimony to the contrary, we don't have any record of the history of these types of issues costing the town any money. So, this committee really doesn't have anything to do here.
Yes, he said it a lot better than I did.
And better than I did, too. So unless there's any other discussion, would someone like to make a motion on the, whether related to the cost reimbursement citizen article that's before us? Joe?
Motion not to adopt.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion on the motion? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed, no? Come on back, Cliff, thanks.
Thank you very much. Are there any other, I don't know who's keeping a tally, Libby, are there any other citizen articles?
The only other one, Mr. Chairman, are the zoning.
Right, okay. Okay, that's what I thought. So we'll defer those? Yeah. But on that one, we're still waiting for the sewer work group, and I spoke to Andrew about that, and they kind of gave a 50-50. So anything else to come before the committee today? The date of our next meeting is Tuesday, January 19th. It'll be in the high school cafeteria at 4:30, and we'll be discussing Public Works, Sewer Enterprise Fund, and solid waste. And remember, that's the day if we get all of our business done on Tuesday, we will not need to have a meeting on that Thursday. Because if the agenda for Thursday is to continue the discussion of the items from Tuesday.
So we may or may not.
Right. I just want to give you a heads up that if we get all the business done on Tuesday, we don't need to hold the meeting on the Thursday because it's the same agenda items.
When are we going to have a discussion about the sewers and 70, 80, 90, $100 million or whatever?
So, we can do it whenever we want, to answer your question. I know that there's an outreach group that's being formed. And I think there's also some activity from the former sewer work group. That's kind of, so there's still some massing of public comment and thinking. So we should schedule a time for deliberation on those. So those are, which articles are those for the sewer? Okay.
Two appropriation articles and then two sewer district articles.
So when is that on our agenda, on our schedule?
Warrant articles, once the board is actually adopted, which is next Wednesday, scheduled for next Wednesday.
Okay. But where in our calendar is the review? Oh, so it's just a review of warrant articles. It's not specific to those.
I mean, the
So-
schedule that you have here plans review warrant articles to start on February 1st.
So if it's something, that, with such a big issue, we may want to spend some quality time on it. We may want to ask staff to come and make presentations. So it'd be good to think about that now. So talk about let me know, let's have a conversation now about how you would like to proceed in our review of that.
A question for Libby, how is the outreach committee going to work with the sewers?
Well, we just had our first, I mean, it's not really a committee, it's basically staff, people, and a couple of board members, and we were mapping out yesterday what our efforts are going to consist of. And right at the moment, subject to getting us to the final agreement, we're planning to issue a newsletter next week. We're planning a direct letter to affected property owners to explain what the projects are all about, and hopefully, if we can work with what a customized letter that would identify what their betterment might be as a beginning of the letter, subject to cost changes in between the time we get the letter and the time the project actually gets assessed. Meetings with various civic and neighborhood groups to be scheduled sometime within the next 2 months. There's more on the website dedicated to the project specifically. Brian's meeting with the members of the former work group on Saturday morning to review updated project cost numbers. We are planning an item on Board of Selectmen's February 10th workshop meeting, which is going to be sort of water quality oriented. One of the agenda topics will be these sewer projects. We will invite public to come for that and discuss comments, questions, concerns, whatever. That's how far we've gotten so far.
Thank you.
So we could have a meeting not dedicated, but where this is the main agenda item. We may even want to invite groups like the former sewer work group or others to attend. What are your thoughts?
Well, it sounds like we ought to wait until March. It seems like there's a lot of that.
One because that's
Well, I think that, there's it sounds like a fairly extensive outreach program that's planned.
There's
And-
also a conversation in the community about keeping where the split's going to go to. And I think that issue is bubbling up for conversations.
The board has voted for the split to be 60/40,
Right.
but I agree. it's
Yeah,
probably-
so, there's a lot of interest out there who are playing on
Sure.
the edges on that, so. And the question is, do we want to engage in that process now, or do we want to engage in that when all that's been finalized?
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Mr. Gibson, which projects are going to go forward on the warrant?
Well, right now, Nantucket/Somerset,
Okay.
and an area that is called Monomoy, but we renamed it to be called Nantucket Harbor Shimon, to more accurately describe that area. And also what is known as the plus parcels, which is kind of the plus department, but are actually additional parcels that are sort of infill areas that the leadership should.
And if I could further, will there be an appropriation when the warrant comes out, or is it just going to be a placeholder for the actual number?
So the actual numbers are generally in motion.
Okay, well, that's what I'm getting at, because I'm trying to answer your question. When will the finance committee have access to those numbers to discuss it for a motion?
Brian gave a presentation to the board last night about updated as we get to the articles and a little bit waiting until the articles are final.
Right.
And the warrant is adopted. And that doesn't mean we can't,
You could give us the update that you gave to the board, to this group too.
Well, with that information, then that will dictate when we as committee start talking about it.
So do you want to do that? How long would that take to give that presentation?
The presentation that I gave last night really was only to, it gave them the analysis from what the sewer planning work group had recommended at 50/50 to what they had adopted, just showing the split and the differences, and then just gave them the updated cost with the new projected betterments, what those might look like and the impact of the tax rate. So it was all, my presentation was almost maybe 3.5 minutes.
So can we still amend the agenda for Tuesday?
I would recommend we put it on Thursday's agenda, because I will have had the benefit of having the meeting with Brian on Wednesday.
But we may not.
DPW's always answer on
Tuesday.
I don't know if you, my opinion, I'm not sure you could get through all that and try to
All right, so,
even begin to
so
consider
maybe we'll just say we're gonna meet on Thursday, and I think that's a thing let's talk about. And then you will have had the sewer work group conversation.
with the former members and go over where,
Okay.
show them the same thing they showed them this work.
Okay, so we'll put that on the agenda. Is that agreeable with everybody?
I have one question. A while ago, we talked about you getting a calculator up on the website.
I'm going to make every attempt to do that, which would do, which what you would, if I can get somebody who actually knows more about
I'm
code
good,
than I do,
thanks.
like I put it properly in, and it would give you an estimate.
Thanks.
I think, as we've discussed, I think that would be very, very helpful. It's nice to have a customized letter, but there's nothing like being able to do it yourself and being able to get a sense. So, that's would just be right
Yeah,
online.
that'd be awesome, yeah.
Put your,
People like you and I would love that kind of stuff.
I hope we're not the only two.
No. Everybody in this committee. So,
I don't think about numbers at all.
before I ask for a motion to adjourn, is there a question?
And sort of follow on this conversation with a question. At some point, Brian, you and I chatted about that you have modeled out, I don't know how many years, 5 years, 10 years, sort of the impact of many of these capital projects, including sewer, with rolling off of debt, so that there's sort of this, what adds to the debt, add to the tax rate, and what maybe subtract from the
First
debt.
Southwest is doing that right now with what the capital program committee had recommended to you, and for all the 10 years, and then the next layer will be the sewer projects on top of that.
I would just suggest, Mr. Chairman, that would be an interesting piece
Yeah,
of information
yeah.
to see when we start looking at
Absolutely.
these
Yeah.
two big projects for the coming fiscal year,
Okay.
as well as stuff that's rolled,
Right.
that is anticipated out.
Yeah. John?
Also, along with that, of course, is going to be a new 10-year plan, then.
Well, it would, right, yeah.
Because the only one that's on the website now is the one that goes up with it as a year old.
Yeah, and actually,
And-
that is going to be updated as soon as we lose a couple pieces of information I'm waiting for.
And then Brian,
Would we have something like
Brian.
that before next Thursday?
Before next Thursday, I can make every effort to.
because John, we're going to have a specific agenda item to look at the 10-year plan. So we haven't scheduled that yet. I'm waiting for
Okay.
Brian to say he's ready for it. He's ready to do it, so
Okay.
we can talk about that as, when we,
Singer's working on that piece of it right now. We had a final follow-up conversation today, so they're gonna get that done relatively soon. And then, like I said, I'm gonna layer the sewer on top of that.
Okay.
So I look at it and see what it does, because what those borrowing impacts do might kind of, will have an impact on how the sewer looks. So I
Right.
just wanna see one before
Yeah.
I see the other with the
Okay.
magnitude of what this does.
You can't look at sewer all by itself.
right, right,
And we're not going to.
Right.
We won't.
right.
And that was my whole
Yeah.
point.
Good, absolutely. So Brian, you'll let us know when you're ready to talk about that. We'll put it on the
We can start
agenda.
a conversation about what these are gonna look like.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, good. Peter?
Can I ask Brian a question? On all the budgets that we have, and we're looking at 2016 fiscal year budget, and then comparing that to a budget in 2017. Currently, do your department heads spread their budget numbers over a 12-month period, or do it quarterly? And is that breakdown based on actual that you've been
It's actual,
experiencing?
right.
So would it make more sense, because I think if I look at that one line item that the chief brought up on OT, if you compared that to actual to date, plus 6 months of budget left to go, you'd be at 400K, which is 4.5% instead of a 10% increase. And I think if we're jumping and looking at these increases based on two budgetary figures, I don't think we're looking at it the right way.
No, and actually.
I don't know if that's a legal thing from what we
Well,
have to
I
do,
don't
or.
budget- You know,
Is this
I don't
yours?
budget on a monthly basis because once you,
Okay.
the appropriation is there.
I'd like that, but it's not, I don't think it's mine. That must be yours.
So I look at,
No, it's
I
okay.
input expenditures on a monthly basis into actuals so that we can see where it's tracking, internally
Yeah.
to make sure as we help them manage through their budget, we can do that. I can tell you that the 3-year average for the overtime, it's actually 421,000 for the last 3 years. But I looked at
Which you show there.
Right, so,
Yeah, yeah.
we can, we'll do that, and we'll sit down with the chief and just go through and look at where the highs and the lows were. We actually have current plus the last 5 years all modeled out in my one. So,
Yeah, you show that now with the way you presented it.
Anything else?
Well, we, yeah,
Oh,
But
okay.
kind of the
Any other
aspect
questions,
of the
comments?
last 6 months.
Is there a motion to adjourn? All those in favor, aye. Opposed, no.
I don't like it for you.
See you all Tuesday.
Yeah,
I want- I-
see, that's my, yeah, I like to do.